Sayadaw has been explaining Paṇḍitā Sayadaw. In order to cultivate Vipassana jhana, one needs to be mindful of the object that arises by being mindful of it as it is. So one should be mindful of the object in the way the object really is. When rising of the abdomen takes place, observe it closely as rising. When rising of the abdomen takes place, note rising with aim and effort, aiming the mind onto the object, putting effort in the noting. The same goes for other objects, such as falling of the abdomen, bending, stretching, turning, lifting, moving, placing, standing, blinking, opening and closing of the eyes, and so on. All these nama rupa are called Buddha. All these nama rupa are called Buddha as they can be discerned directly. When lifting of the foot takes place, note it as lifting. When moving of the foot takes place, note it as moving. When placing of the foot arises, note it as placing. Even the minute activities such as blinking, opening and closing of the eyes should also be noted. And Sayadaw says it is not difficult to note them. When noting the object, one should do so with aim and effort, aiming the mind onto the object, putting effort so that the noting mind reaches the object. In the practice, the person does not need to be reading scriptures. The person only needs to practice according to the guidance and instruction. It is very simple and clear. When noting the object, one should assert, aiming, directing the mind onto the object, putting effort so that the mind reaches the object. Noting the object with aim and effort, sati, mindfulness, and samadhi, concentration, automatically arises. And sati and samadhi will gradually become more and more mature, more and more strengthened. When noting the object with aim and effort, one comes to discern the nature. It is not the knowledge gained through speculation. It is not the kind of knowledge one gains learning from teacher. The knowledge that arises by noting the object is very clear. And today Sayadaw will explain what will be the benefits of practice from both theoretical and practical aspects. Paṇḍitā Sayadaw. One should be mindful of the nama rupa the moment the object arises. Sabhava here means yatha sabhavato. One should observe in the way they really are. If one looks at the object, one will see. If the person wants to know the nature, the characteristic of the object, one should observe the object at the moment the object arises. When it is said that one should look at the object, observe the object, it cannot be done so with the ordinary eye. What it means is one should look at it, observe it with the mind eye. One should be mindful of the object the moment the object arises, so that mindfulness will be sustained on the object. In order to keep the mindfulness glued onto the object, one needs effort. One should exert effort in the noting. Effort should not just be ordinary, it should be atapa, it should be ardent effort in noting the object. One should not be cold or sluggish, but one should exert ardent effort, always ready, alert, active in the noting. One should not be gazing or daydreaming. One should always be active and alert. One should not be slow and sluggish. There should be atapa, ardent effort in noting the object. As soon as the object arises, one should note it right away. As soon as rising of the abdomen takes place, one should note it right away, while the rising of the abdomen is freshly new. In order to have mindfulness, one should exert ardent effort. When the person is over-eager, when the person exerts excessive effort, then the mind slips away from the object. And also, when the effort is slack, the noting mind falls short of the object. In order to keep the effort just right, in order that the noting mind should be direct with the object, one should aim the noting mind onto the object. Aiming is one of the jhanic factors, and one should aim and direct the mind onto the object. The jhanic factor, vitakka, is very important. So, when the new object arises, one should note it right away so that one will come to know the true nature, the true characteristic. In order to keep the mindfulness glued onto the object, in order to keep the mind calm, collected, one should exert ardent effort, aiming the mind onto the object so that the noting mind will be direct or face to face with the object. In this way, one should note every arising object with aim and effort. There should not be thinking, there should not be imagining. One should not be thinking what it is, why is it, how is it, rather than noting the object right away as soon as the object arises. In order to discern the true nature, in order to cultivate true knowledge, one should not be thinking or daydreaming or fantasizing. Some of the people think that through the thinking one can gain knowledge, but it is not so. If one is thinking, then there will only be thinking knowledge which is not correct, which may not be correct. But in order to gain true knowledge, one should note the presently arising object. As soon as rising of the abdomen takes place, note it right away as rising. As soon as falling of the abdomen takes place, note it right away as falling. And one should exert ardent efforts in noting the object, aiming, directing the noting mind onto the object. In order to keep the mindfulness stick onto the object, glued onto the object, one should exert effort. In order to keep the mind direct or face to face with the object, one should aim and direct one's noting mind onto the object. In this way, the two mental strengths, aiming and effort, are needed. They are also called Dhamma. They are also called Dhamma. They are the mental strength or the mental power. Having the mental strength, mental power of aiming and effort, then mindfulness will be sustained on the object. When noting rising and falling of the abdomen, at times the noting mind falls on form or shape of the abdomen. At times the noting mind falls onto the manner of rising or falling. However, even if the noting mind falls on form or shape or the manner, as long as the noting mind does not go elsewhere, it is good enough. But noting the object with aim and effort, when sati mindfulness becomes strong, one can discern the true nature, such as stiffness, tension, movement, when noting the rising of the abdomen. In the beginning of the practice, when noting rising and falling of the abdomen or any other object, any other nama rupa, the knowledge one gains by noting it, the person discerns mixing with the sandhana panyati form or shape concept. So in the beginning, it happens that the person come to know the form or shape concept. At times, the person come to know the nature, such as stiffness, tension, together with the form or shape concept. At times, the person come to know stiffness or tension together with the manner. So in the beginning, one cannot discern the true nature yet. So at times one comes to know the form or shape or the manner in the beginning of the practice. And in the beginning of the practice, one cannot discern the nature yet. So one should understand this fact. In order to cultivate samadhi sikha, concentration training, one needs to exert ardent effort, and one should aim the mind onto the object. So these two kinds of mental strength are needed all the time, continuously during the practice, so that there will be attandi, there will be lack of laziness. Dandi is laziness. In the mental development practice, in order to develop the mind and the knowledge, dandi, laziness, is the nearest enemy. When practicing diligently with ardent efforts, it happens that laziness creeps in. When one starts to practice meditation in order to keep the mind pure and clean, in order to uplift one's life, in the beginning of the practice, when one has not seen the results yet, when one has not get the benefit yet, then it happens that the person does not practice respectfully. As one has not seen the benefits yet, in the beginning of the practice, the mind becomes slack. The person gets afraid of getting exhausted physically and mentally. Especially those who come from countries where the technology is much advanced. They are so used to depending on technology that they do not rely on themselves, but they depend more on the technology. So when they come to practice meditation in the center, they do not want to exert effort in the practice because they have been depending on, relying on the technology so much that they are not used to exerting effort, and when they come for practice, they do not want to exert effort in the practice. When laziness arises, then it hinders the practice. So in the practice, in order to uplift one's life, laziness, not wanting to exert effort, becoming exhausted, wanting to take easy, such kind of laziness can arise. So it is the greatest hindrance in the meditation practice that develops the mind and the knowledge. So when this hindrance, laziness, arises, it is a true threat to the practice that it will not be easy to progress. So laziness has been following throughout many lives, and also during the practice, laziness arises when the person does not see the benefit yet in the beginning of the practice. When practicing high-class Vipassana practice, there should be Paṇḍitā. One should not be sluggish or lazy. When laziness arises, the person does not want to exert effort. The person wants to take easy in the practice. The person feels exhausted in the practice. So it is important to overwhelm laziness. One should exert courageous effort in order to overcome laziness. When effort becomes strong, then one overwhelms laziness. And also, one should apply the opposite force in order to drive out laziness. The opposite force of laziness is vitakka, initial application, directing the noting mind onto the object. Directing the noting mind onto the object, one applies the opposite force, driving out the laziness. So the question, why one should exert effort? The answer is, one has to exert ardent effort to overwhelm laziness. Why one should assert aiming, directing? One should assert aiming, directing, so that having aiming, directing, having vitakka as the opposite force, one can drive out the laziness. So in this way, these two factors, aiming and effort, should be applied in order to dispel laziness. In order to develop the mind and the knowledge, one should uplift one practice systematically. If one does not make use of the correct method, if one does not use this guidance, then the practice will not be good and the mind will be slack and sluggish. There will be kosata, laziness. When the person has laziness, the lazy person's behavior will be disgusting. When the person does not assert effort in the high class Satipatthana practice, his or her behavior will be disgusting. One should have faith and confidence in the ardent effort. If the lazy person is among the other people who are successful, who gain victory, then the lazy person will be blamed as lazy bone, not exerting effort in the practice. Kosata is the laziness. The ardent effort is opposite of laziness. Ardent effort overwhelms laziness. As soon as rising of the abdomen takes place, one should assert ardent effort in noting it right away, noting it as rising, so that laziness will not gain the upper hand. Laziness keeps the mind contracted, constricted, that the mind will not be fresh when the laziness is present. Vitakka keeps the mind active, and vitakka keeps the mind open, blossom, and active, so that laziness will not arise. Just as flowers bloom and open in the sunlight, having vitakka, the mind will be active, open, and blossom, keeping the mind fresh. Tinamita keeps the mind constricted and contracted. In order to drive out the laziness, one needs the overwhelming force. In order to overwhelm laziness, and one should also apply the opposing force to drive out the laziness. So in the beginning of the practice, one needs to have ardent effort. Having ardent effort, one overwhelms laziness. Aiming, directing the noting mind, vitakka is the opposing force to drive out laziness. In this way, one should exert ardent effort and vitakka every single second in the practice, so that laziness will be dispelled. If there is one moment of effort and vitakka, for that moment laziness cannot arise. If the person does not exert effort in the practice, then the person is losing to overwhelm laziness. If the person does not exert effort in the practice for 1 minute, there will be 1 minute laziness, 1 minute of laziness arising. In this way, having laziness, one will not cultivate jhana, one is losing to cultivate jhana. And the person will be taking long in the practice without making progress. When noting the object with ardent effort, having ardent effort, the mind will be strengthened, the mind will be active and alert. When the person does not aim the noting mind on the object, the mind will not be fresh. One should aim the noting mind onto the object. Having aiming in noting the object, there will be vitakka. The mind will be fresh, open, and blossom. Noting the object with aim and effort, the mind will be active, alert, fresh. One gains the benefit of the practice immediately. Without noting the object with aim and effort, one will lose to have benefit of the practice. Aiming and effort are called Dhamma or Sati. They are the mental energy. One will not get mental energy by noting just once or twice, but one has to assert aim and effort repeatedly, again and again, continuously, so that one will develop the mental energy. So, noting the object with aim and effort, when the mind falls on the rising of the abdomen, at first, one discerns the form or shape of the abdomen. At times, one comes to know the manner of rising or falling. But as the yogi gain momentum in the practice, when sati and samadhi, mindfulness and concentration become strong, the paññatti concept will no longer manifest, but the noting mind falls on the nature such as stiffness, tension, movement, and so on. The noting mind rubs and strokes against the object, discerning the nature such as stiffness, tension, movement, and one becomes certain of the object, discerning the nature, stiffness, tension, movement, and so on. If the noting mind does not rub against the object, if the noting mind does not stroke against the object, then one is not certain of the object. There will be confusion and doubt. But when the mind rubs against the object, one becomes certain, discerning the nature, stiffness, tension, movement, and so on. In this way, one needs vitakka, initial application, aiming, directing the noting mind onto the object. One needs vichara, sustained application, the noting mind rubbing against the object, stroking against the object. Having vitakka and vichara, one develops Vipassana jnana, and by developing Vipassana jnana, one also cultivates Vipassana jhana. If one does not note efficiently, when the noting mind is not concurrent with the object, one will not be certain of the object. So one should note the object, directing the noting mind onto the object. It is directly opposite of laziness. The mind will be fresh. Having vichara, sustained application, the mind stroking, rubbing against the object, then one will be certain of the object, discerning the nature, and there will not be confusion or doubt. When the practice becomes smooth, there will be piti, joy, satisfaction, happiness, one-pointedness. So these will automatically follow. Having satisfaction, the person removes the boredom during the practice. One feels comfortable. There will not be distraction or restlessness. Having happiness, both the mind and the body feels tranquil, happy, and the mind fall calm, collected on the object moment by moment. And one will not be wanting this or that. Kama chanda, sensual desire, have no chance to arise. In this way, the nirvana hindrances that pollutes the mind will be dispelled. Panyaya dobali karana, the hindrances that weakens the mind, also will be dispelled. In the practice, the hindrances make the mind polluted, and it also weakens the mind. Having the jhanic factors in the practice, the hindrances will be dispelled. Hindrances block the wholesomeness from arising. When one develops these jhanic factors during the practice, one removes and dispels these hindrances. But if the person is gazing, thinking, daydreaming, then the person loses all these benefits of removing the hindrances and defilements. So it is very important to understand how each and every moment of mindfulness is very precious. Understanding the value of practice, gaining the benefits of practice, one will be able to practice. One is willing to give up sleeping hours in order to practice diligently. But some of the yogis, they say that I can only do it if I get how many hours of practice and so on. They will say that they need certain hours of sleep in order to go on. So Sayadaw is not encouraging the yogi on things that are not possible. One needs to have courageous effort in the practice. Sayadaw encourages the yogi to practice diligently, courageously. And Sayadaw will not say something that is not possible. Sayadaw is encouraging that by practicing diligently, one will gain these benefits. So Sayadaw encourages the yogis to make use of the time usefully, meaningfully. And Sayadaw ensures that there is no death that is caused by lack of sleep during the practice. So one should practice courageously, not to complain that I am losing sleep or I need more sleep. Please practice courageously. Practicing Satipatthana meditation is also compared to solving out mathematical problem. When solving out a mathematical problem, one needs to use correct formula, and one should also solve out using correct method in order to get the correct answer. So if the student works out the mathematical problem using the correct formula, the correct way of solving out, then the student can show the teacher how he or she had worked out the mathematical problem and showing the answer. So writing the answer alone is not enough. You need to show the teacher how you have solved out the problem. In the same way, when yogis come to report in the interview, they should not just be saying their answers, I feel like this, I feel good, I feel like that. It is not complete report. So you need to tell the teacher what object that you've been noting, how you noted it, what happened to the object when you noted it. So in order to practice, one should aim the mind onto the object. One should put effort in noting the object. And later on, Sayadaw will explain how one should practice efficiently by noting the object, and Sayadaw will explain how one should report in the interview. And Sayadaw will continue the next day.